For thousands of years, something monumental lay hidden beneath layers of dust, stone, and silence, not just lost to time, but deliberately erased. Generations passed, empires rose and fell, and still, this secret remained untouched. It was said that the resting place of a legendary king had been concealed on purpose, sealed away because what lay inside was never meant for ordinary human eyes. Some believed it held unimaginable wealth, others whispered it guarded forbidden knowledge, and a few warned that disturbing it would awaken truths capable of shaking the modern world to its core. And then, someone finally found a way in. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, because what you're about to hear challenges everything we think we know about ancient history. The story begins not with gold or glory, but with a rumor so old it was nearly forgotten. Deep beneath Jerusalem's ancient terrain, long dismissed passages and collapsed corridors hinted at something more. Scholars had argued for centuries over whether these tales were symbolic, exaggerated, or pure fiction. But one overlooked tunnel, ignored for generations, became the key that changed everything. At the center of this mystery stands a name that echoes across civilizations: Solomon. Unlike most rulers of his time, Solomon was remembered not primarily for war, but for brilliance. He inherited a fragile kingdom at a young age, stepping into power with the weight of expectation and uncertainty pressing down on him. Yet instead of ruling through fear, he ruled through insight. Alliances replaced battles. Trade routes replaced bloodshed. Under his leadership, wealth flowed into the kingdom from every direction, transforming it into a center of influence that rivaled any power of the ancient world. But Solomon's greatest achievement was not his riches, it was his vision. At the heart of Jerusalem, he ordered the construction of a structure unlike anything seen before. It took years to complete, with craftsmen working in near silence, stones cut so precisely they fit together without force. Rare wood arrived from distant lands. Precious metals covered the interior, reflecting light in ways said to feel almost otherworldly. This was more than a building. It was a statement, a bridge between the human and the divine. And yet Solomon's legend was shaped just as much by his mind as by his monuments. One account tells of a dispute so impossible that no court could resolve it. 2 women, 1 child, no witnesses. Solomon listened, paused, and then proposed a solution so shocking it silenced the room. His words weren't meant to be carried out. They were meant to expose the truth. And they did. In a single moment, compassion revealed itself, and justice was served. Stories like this spread far beyond Israel, turning Solomon into a living symbol of wisdom itself. So powerful was his reputation that rulers from distant kingdoms sought him out, not for conquest, but for conversation. Among them was a queen, whose journey alone became legend. She arrived with wealth, questions, and tests meant to challenge even the sharpest mind. None of it rattled him. When she departed, it was said she left with more than answers. She left changed. Yet for all his greatness, Solomon understood something most kings did not. Legacy can be dangerous. Long ago, a question was posed to a king known for seeing what others could not. It was not a question about distance or direction, but about perception itself, how one might recognize what is hidden in plain sight. Solomon's answer was never recorded word for word, but his life offered the explanation. He ruled with the understanding that the greatest truths are not blocked by obstacles, but concealed behind intention. That belief shaped an empire unlike any the ancient world had known. His dominion extended far beyond the hills of Jerusalem, reaching coastlines and territories whose exact locations are still debated today. Fleets disappeared into the horizon and returned bearing the extraordinary materials, creatures, and resources that transformed regional trade and elevated his kingdom to unmatched prosperity. In the southern deserts, vast extraction sites operated under his authority, producing metals in quantities so advanced that modern excavations continue to uncover evidence of an industrial system centuries ahead of its time. Yet when Solomon's reign ended, something crucial was missing. There was no final monument to mark his passing, no confirmed burial site, no chamber preserved for future generations to discover. Unlike other rulers whose tombs proclaimed their power long after death, Solomon seemed to erase himself from the physical record. Over time, theories multiplied. Some placed his remains beneath sacred ground, others believed he was hidden in sealed caverns, intentionally removed from reach. As decades turned into centuries, the absence of proof slowly transformed a historical question into a dismissed legend. Eventually, the search lost its urgency. Excavations failed, records contradicted one another, scholars redirected their focus elsewhere, and the mystery was quietly shelved. It was assumed that if anything had existed, it had either been destroyed or never existed at all. The story of Solomon's final resting place was considered closed. Then something unexpected happened, not through a grand expedition or a public announcement, but through a subtle disruption, an anomaly that did not belong. A minor discovery, its significance unclear at first, reopened a question the world had abandoned. What followed suggested that what lay hidden was never meant to be found easily, and certainly not by accident. This was not simply about uncovering a grave. It was about confronting something deliberately concealed, preserved in silence for thousands of years. The renewed investigation led deep into one of the most complex archaeological landscapes on Earth. Beneath layers of history and stone, modern instruments began detecting patterns that nature alone could not explain. After severe weather altered a forgotten slope, a faint irregularity appeared, small enough to escape notice, precise enough to defy coincidence. Beneath it, scans revealed structured passages carved with purpose, forming a system designed to confuse, delay, and protect whatever lay beyond. As researchers moved carefully forward, the danger became clear. These underground spaces were engineered with deception in mind. False paths, unstable sections, and intentional weaknesses meant to collapse under intrusion. Every movement carried the risk of destroying what had survived untouched for millennia. Whoever created this place understood time, threat, and human curiosity far better than anyone expected. Whether what lies at the center is a tomb, a warning, or something far more unsettling remains unknown. But one conclusion is unavoidable. Solomon's disappearance was not an accident of history. It was a choice. And whatever is now emerging from the earth suggests that some secrets are not lost. They are simply waiting for the moment when the world is forced to face them. For weeks, Dr. Carter lived inside a world few people ever see, surrounded by fragments of stone and fading symbols that most historians had dismissed as meaningless scratches. To her, they felt intentional, almost cautious, as if the past itself were speaking in a lowered voice. These markings were not meant to attract attention or guide explorers forward. They existed to confuse, to mislead, and to quietly reward only those patient enough to understand what was being left unsaid. The more she studied them, the clearer it became that this trail was designed by minds that understood human greed and curiosity better than most modern experts ever could. Yet the true breakthrough did not come from libraries or laboratories. It came from a story whispered through generations, repeated by shepherds who had no interest in archaeology or history. They spoke of a hillside that behaved differently at night, where moonlight reflected strangely off the rock, as though the ground itself remembered something ancient. When Dr. Carter finally stood there, the sensation was immediate and unsettling. The soil shifted beneath her feet, damp and heavy, and the stillness felt unnatural, not empty, but watchful, as if the land was holding its breath. At that moment, doubt vanished. Whatever had been hidden here was not accidental. It was protected. What lay beyond the concealed passage was sealed behind an obstacle that defied simplicity. A massive stone barrier stood in absolute silence, untouched since the age of kings. It was not merely placed there to block entry, but to intimidate anyone who dared approach it. When the team finally managed to apply enough pressure to move it, the sound was overwhelming, a deep thunder rolling through the mountain as though something ancient had been disturbed from its sleep. The space beyond revealed a level of planning that left no room for coincidence. Corridors twisted into dead ends, floors concealed structural weaknesses, and narrow passages forced intruders to slow their progress. This was not a tomb meant to be discovered. It was a puzzle meant to exhaust and punish the unworthy. Along the entrance walls, barely visible under centuries of dust, were etched symbols arranged in deliberate repetition. 7 markings, aligned with mathematical precision, mirrored a sacred pattern known from the era of Solomon. They were not artistic flourishes. They were instructions encoded in stone. Advancing deeper required absolute discipline. Using modern scanning equipment, the team mapped each chamber before stepping forward, knowing that instinct could be fatal. The air grew heavier, colder, and unnervingly silent. Even sound seemed reluctant to travel. Time blurred as days passed in careful alignment of ancient mechanisms, each movement measured, each breath controlled. One miscalculation would have collapsed centuries of history into rubble. Then, without warning, the mountain responded. A sharp fracture cracked through the stone, followed by a low vibration that shook dust from the ceiling. The barrier shifted just enough to expose a narrow opening, darker than any natural cave. No air flowed outward. No echo answered their presence. It was as if the space beyond existed beyond the rules of the living world. Dr. Carter raised her hand, stopping everyone instantly. This was no longer an excavation or a scientific exercise. It was a moment suspended between past and present, where history was not being studied, but awakened. Whatever had been sealed away here had remained untouched, not because it was forgotten, but because it was never meant to be reached easily. And as the darkness opened before them, one truth became impossible to ignore. This place was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far larger, something that would challenge assumptions, unsettle beliefs, and force the modern world to confront a secret that had waited patiently for thousands of years to be found. If you felt something pulling you toward this story, it's because moments like this were never meant to be rushed. The instant light pierces the darkness and reflects off something that does not belong underground. Reality seems to hesitate. The world narrows. Sound fades. Even the mind struggles to process what the eyes are seeing. In that frozen moment, one truth becomes unavoidable. The hunt is over. The past is no longer a rumor or a theory. It is standing here, silent and undeniable, far beneath the ancient foundations of Jerusalem, in a chamber sealed away before empires rose and collapsed. A group of researchers stands shoulder to shoulder, unable to look away. This place does not feel abandoned. It feels preserved. Objects rest exactly where they were placed, arranged with intention rather than haste, as though someone carefully prepared this space, knowing it would one day be entered again. Gold reflects softly from every corner, not dulled by time, but glowing with a warmth that suggests it has been waiting rather than aging. Along the walls, vessels crafted with extraordinary precision catch the light, their surfaces engraved with markings that feel both sacred and deliberate. These are not decorations meant to impress. They are messages, identities carved into metal by hands that believed what they were creating would outlast them. The air itself carries a presence, layered with the faint but unmistakable traces of herbs, oils, and resins. It is a scent that does not belong to decay, but to ritual, as though the chamber remembers the final moments before it was sealed. At the center of the space rises an object that shifts the weight of the room entirely. A seven-branched menorah stands grounded and flawless, its proportions aligning precisely with ancient descriptions preserved in texts and tradition. This is not an artistic interpretation or ceremonial copy. Its presence feels authoritative, almost confrontational, as though it does not need to prove its authenticity. It simply exists, daring history to deny it. Every step deeper into the chamber reveals fragments of a world that once reached far beyond its borders. Threads of ancient fabric, fragile yet distinct, hint at distant trade routes that crossed oceans and deserts. Intricately worked ivory suggests diplomatic exchanges with kingdoms long erased from maps. Small containers, still sealed after centuries, open to reveal gemstones set with careful symmetry, stones sourced from lands that required months of travel to reach. One of the researchers, overwhelmed by the scale of it all, quietly admits that no modern collection could rival what has remained hidden here. Then comes a moment no one is prepared for. A clay vessel, untouched since antiquity, is carefully opened. The air changes instantly. Spices bloom into the chamber. Saffron, frankincense, citrus notes so vivid they feel newly gathered. It is deeply unsettling. Time does not feel like it has passed here. It feels like it paused. The perfection of it all raises an unsettling possibility. This chamber was not forgotten. It was intentionally preserved. Yet the deeper they look, the more inconsistencies begin to surface. Certain symbols do not align with known traditions. Some designs feel slightly out of place, as though they belong to another era or another hand. The possibility emerges that this chamber did not belong to one king alone. Perhaps it evolved, growing as power shifted, as successors added their own legacies beside an already legendary name. The excitement is undeniable, but it is matched by a growing sense of unease. In a place like this, unanswered questions feel louder than certainty. Despite the overwhelming discovery surrounding them, no one celebrates. Movements remain slow and deliberate. Scanning equipment traces every surface, capturing details invisible to the naked eye. Nothing is touched without documentation. One careless decision could erase what centuries of Earth have guarded with ruthless efficiency. The menorah alone carries implications too great to process in the moment. Yet even as history unfolds before them, a shared understanding settles over the room. This is not what they came for. They were searching for a final resting place, a conclusion to a legend. What they have found instead feels like a threshold. This chamber does not close a story. It opens one. It feels constructed to impress, to distract, and perhaps to test those who enter it. Every instinct tells them the same thing. Whatever lies beyond this space was hidden with greater intention, sealed deeper, and protected for reasons far more serious than wealth. The treasure alone is enough to overwhelm the senses, but it is not what ultimately stops the room. The real shift comes when attention drifts away from the gold and settles on the stone itself. As light moves slowly across the walls, something far more disturbing emerges. These markings were not meant to impress or beautify. They feel intentional, deliberate, almost confrontational. At their center is a sharply defined emblem, carved with absolute confidence, a symbol long associated with Solomon's authority. Ancient tradition speaks of it not simply as a royal mark, but as a sign of command, one believed to represent dominion over forces unseen. From that central figure, patterns explode outward in precise formations. Some lines are clean and restrained, others bend into complex geometries that feel closer to engineering diagrams than religious art. The precision is unsettling. Ratios repeat. Angles mirror one another. Measurements align with an accuracy that feels far too sophisticated for the era in which they were supposedly created. One member of the team quietly remarks that this is not religious symbolism at all, but something closer to applied mathematics, frozen into stone. The implication hangs heavy. Whoever designed this space possessed knowledge that does not fit comfortably into accepted history. As the team absorbs the implications, another discovery quietly demands attention. In a recessed corner of the chamber, deliberately placed and carefully stacked, rests a collection of clay tablets. They are not scattered or abandoned. They were arranged. Each tablet is covered in tightly packed Hebrew script, some softened by time, others so sharply cut they appear almost untouched. Several read like formal records, referencing dimensions and measurements that align perfectly with known descriptions of Solomon's temple. But one tablet stands apart, both in placement and in content. Its language behaves differently. Sentences curve where they should end. Meanings overlap. The structure feels intentionally unstable, as though it were designed to resist straightforward reading. Rather than documenting something, it seems to challenge the reader, pointing toward knowledge that is not meant to be understood all at once. At its center is a repeated reference to a key, not in the physical sense, but as a concept, something that unlocks understanding rather than doors. Dr. Carter stops breathing for a moment as the realization settles in. Ancient texts have long spoken of a so-called Key of Solomon, a body of knowledge rumored to contain codes, rituals, and formulas dismissed for centuries as later myth or superstition. Standing here, surrounded by evidence that refuses to behave like fiction, that dismissal suddenly feels premature. No one voices the thought, but everyone feels it. These writings may not describe how something was built. They may describe how something was controlled. Then the space offers up one final provocation. Set into a narrow cavity in the wall, almost invisible unless the light strikes it just right, sits a compact chest. It is small enough to carry, yet looks impossibly heavy. Its surface is dark, reinforced, and marked with the same emblem carved throughout the chamber. There are no obvious locks, no hinges, no visible method of entry. It is not designed to invite curiosity. It is designed to discourage it. The atmosphere tightens as the team gathers closer. No one reaches for it. Instinct takes over, the kind that warns of consequences before logic can explain them. This object does not feel like treasure. It feels like a boundary. Whatever lies inside was sealed intentionally, not to protect it from theft, but to protect the world from it, or perhaps to protect it from the world. Whether the chest contains instructions, a map, or something that points toward an even greater mystery remains unknown. But one thing is clear. This chamber was never meant to be the end of the discovery. It was meant to prepare whoever entered for what comes next. And whatever Solomon hid beyond this point was not buried to be forgotten. At first, nothing seems unusual. The chamber appears quiet, almost satisfied, as though it has already given up its greatest secrets. Then someone notices a flaw, something so subtle it could be dismissed as imagination. A mark that disrupts the harmony of the walls, a detail that doesn't follow the logic of the space. In a structure built with absolute precision, even the smallest inconsistency feels intentional. And in that instant, confidence turns into unease. Attention drifts away from the objects and settles on the stone itself. Not the wealth, not the craftsmanship, but the message hidden where no one would think to look. As light is repositioned, shallow cuts in the wall begin to form shapes. Words emerge slowly, as though they are choosing the moment to be seen. The language is not formal, not ceremonial. It feels reflective, almost private, like a thought captured before it could disappear. There is a weight to it, a sense that whoever carved it understood the passage of time far better than most rulers ever did. The meaning lands with unexpected force. The words speak of guidance, of understanding, of looking beyond what is immediately visible. They do not claim power. They do not demand reverence. Instead, they invite contemplation. The phrasing carries echoes of wisdom literature, but stripped of authority, leaving behind something more human. It feels less like a command and more like a confession left behind for someone unknown. Once the discovery is shared beyond the chamber, the reaction is immediate and overwhelming. Specialists from across disciplines descend into debate. Linguists analyze syntax. Historians compare phrasing. Mathematicians note subtle structural patterns hidden in the wording. Some believe the message represents the most authentic glimpse yet into the mind of an ancient ruler, a rare moment where history speaks without ornament. Others remain skeptical, warning that powerful names have always attracted imitation. The arguments multiply, but consensus refuses to form. Dr. Carter watches the controversy unfold without urgency. To her, the argument itself is part of the design. This place was never meant to deliver certainty. It was meant to slow people down, to force reflection rather than reaction. Every discovery seems to ask the same question in a different way. How much do we truly understand about those who came before us? But one realization eclipses all others. If this message was placed here deliberately, then it was never meant to stand alone. It was meant to prepare. The chamber feels less like a destination and more like a threshold, an introduction to something deeper, quieter, and far more guarded. Beyond the walls lies another space, sealed with care, untouched by time or debate. Whatever rests there has not revealed itself through symbols or words. It waits in silence, indifferent to belief or disbelief. And when that silence is finally broken, it will not matter who was right, because history will no longer be theoretical. It will be present.